Well, the president is kicking off his second term with an agenda that includes gay rights, immigration reform, and gun control. But a new poll is raising questions about whether there is a disconnect between what the president wants and what the American people want. According to the latest national survey by the Pew Research Center, Americans feel the top three priorities in 2013 should be, in this order, number one. Look at the numbers. Number one by far, strengthening the economy, 86% say that's number one for them. Number two, improving the job situation, 79% say that's what they want focused on. And number three, reducing the budget deficit at 72%. And that number on the budget deficit is up 20 points from when President Obama started his term in office. So those are the priorities of the American people. Does President Obama have his eye on the ball? Joining me now to discuss it, Heidi Harris, who's radio host of The Heidi Harris Show, and Leslie Marshall, who is a syndicated radio talk show host and a Fox News contributor. So there is a bit of a disconnect if you just look at how the agenda items were spelled out in the president's inaugural address, because he's talking about, gay rights and immigration reform and climate change, Heidi, and the American people seem to be talking about something very different.
They are. It's interesting how he didn't really spend any time at all in the economy. Building bridges and roads and things like that, that's really not going to improve the economy. And that's pretty much all he said about it in his speech. So it just goes to show that he's really not listening to what the American people want, which doesn't surprise a lot of folks. His vision of America, we on the right believe, is very different from the vision of America that our founders had. And it seems like he's trying to take us in an entirely different direction.
What did you make of it, Leslie? There wasn't a lot said about jobs or the economy in the inaugural address. And the one thing he said about the deficit was, I understand it needs attention, but, and then sort of defended entitlement spending.
Well, first of all, one of the things that we know that any president runs into, regardless of their politics, is they have so much on their plate. One of the first priorities of our commander-in-chief is to keep us safe. And I think after all of the recent massacres at the hands of guns, the president felt compelled and urged by many citizens and other polls. Emerson had a poll yesterday that showed 52% of the American people want some kind of control on guns, certainly not infringing upon the Second Amendment. But when the president is not going to ignore job creation, but we need to be realistic, and I think the president is being. The president says, Heidi, you talk about infrastructure. That does help the economy. That does create jobs. And quite frankly, although the economy, job creation, and the deficit are number 1, 2, and 3 with this poll across the country, you talk to somebody in New Jersey, and that's not the case right now. Global warming is huge. Infrastructure is huge because they're recovering, as one example of a state, from a Superstorm Sandy.
Yeah,
so
but I mean, nationally, we have seen
people are freezing their butts off in New Jersey, complaining about global warming right now. Yeah, it's a real problem in New Jersey right now, freezing to death.
But nationally, we've seen this concern. I mean, it's not just the Pew poll. It's not just the Pew poll that points to these. I mean, jobs, the economy, and the deficit as being huge for the American people. The thing that jumped out at me on this, Heidi, is the things that Leslie just mentioned are actually at the bottom. It's not just
right.
You could say, okay, they do care about gun control, and especially in the wake of Newtown and all these shootings, but they're at the bottom in terms of importance. 3 of the bottom 4 are gun control, improving infrastructure, and addressing global warming. So, I mean, his priorities are down here, and the priorities that they're focused on are way up here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all agree on one thing, which is crazy people shouldn't have guns. Of course, we all agree on that. That's obvious. But that doesn't mean you take away my gun rights. And although the numbers are up as far as people being concerned about gun control from a couple of years ago, ultimately, yeah, people are saying, wait a minute. That's not going to solve the problem to control how many bullets I have in my gun. It's ridiculous. He's not focusing on the things that most Americans are really concerned about every day when they sit there at their dinner table and try to figure out how they're going to pay their bills, when their house value is going to come back. That's what they're concerned about every day.
Where is the leadership on the deficit, Leslie? I mean, where is the White House coming out and saying, this is how we're going to get it done?
Well, part of the problem here is we have a divided Congress, and that's not an excuse. Again, it's a reality. The president sits down. When we have a fiscal cliff deal, what is it? It is a temporary fix because it has, okay, we're going to do this at point A and then point B, and we'll talk later for point C. And the same thing with the debt ceiling. Everything we do is temporary, and this is especially with the gridlock between the Republicans having majority in the House and Democrats in the Senate. Now, this doesn't, excuse the president from sitting down and talking about these issues, but I don't feel that he has said, okay, these issues don't matter, and I don't even think they've been on the back burner. I think everyone is very clear with where the president stands as to what his ideas and the Democratic philosophy is with regard to job creation and what we need to do with the economy. The Republicans are clear. Congress needs to sit down and work this out. The president's not their babysitter. He's not running a daycare center. And the American people need to make our congressional electors and our senators that are elected, we need to make it known what we want. Those are our priorities. And by the way, Heidi, yesterday, California, lowest foreclosure rate in the month of January in years. And that's a step in the right direction economically.
Go ahead, Heidi.
That's because a lot of those houses, by the way, people haven't made payments on for a long time. They need to be put on the market, and they haven't been yet. President Obama talked a little bit about deficits when he talked about Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, and he actually said those things strengthen us as a nation. How can government programs and keeping people on government programs strengthen us as a nation? That is scary to us on the right. That's not the right direction.
We're going to talk about that coming up in our next hour, but they used to be 1/3 of the federal spending, those three programs, and now they're 2/3. And that's just part of the problem in terms of, finding a budget. We haven't had a budget in 4 years, but just getting a balanced budget and then tackling the debt. And no one seems to be taking the lead on that right now in Washington. Ladies, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megyn.